Hello ladies and gentlemen, and welcome back to another YouTube video. My name is Pollux the Wise, and I hope you guys are doing absolutely froggin' splendid, taking care of yourselves, and as always, staying safe. Today's episode, we are diving into part 3 of the modding tutorial for Kingdom Rush Vengeance on Steam. If you guys haven't checked out the first couple episodes already on this series, I highly recommend that you guys do so. Today's episode, we are going to be going through the process of modifying towers. We're going to take a look at a couple different examples, one of which is going to be a barracks-like tower with some sort of rally range, and the other one is going to be, well, a tower that basically doesn't have any kind of rally range. So without further ado, ladies and gentlemen, let's go ahead and froggin' get started. So as per usual, we're going to be starting at the same file path that we normally do, which is this PC, Windows C, in parentheses, program files x86 in parentheses, Steam, Steam apps, common, and then Kingdom Rush Vengeance, lastly followed by Kingdom Rush 4, KR4. So we're going to see this list here. We're going to go to the same folder that we normally do in this series, which is Settings. And we're going to see this list right here. Now, it is important to note that there are a couple of different spots where tower code can be found in. It's not underneath just towers_settings. Some of that code for tower abilities and other stats actually falls underneath units_settings. So it is important to note there's two different places 9 out of 10 times when it comes to dealing with towers and modifying them that you're going to want to look for various chunks of code to change. But without further ado, let's just go ahead and get started. We'll take a look at one tower. I'm thinking we're probably going to go with the infernal mage, and unfortunately my code window opened up in the wrong window and I just accidentally exited out. Whoops. Let's go ahead and full screen that so we can see things a little bit more clearly, and let's go ahead and get started by doing control find. So control plus F key, as you guys remember from the previous episodes that we've used this helpful handy dandy tool. So we're going to type in Ember because that is the name of this tower in the code. It's not infernal mage, it's Ember, E-M-B-E-R. And if we hit find next, the first result should be Ember_Lords. So this is the Ember Lords Mage Tower, or also known as the Infernal Mage Tower from Kingdom Rush Vengeance. So this is the one that has the demons on top of them that shoot fireballs at their enemies. And it's the one that we actually modified in the first episode of the debut of this series, and we changed the cost of the tower at level 1 to 1,000 gold. Now obviously that's a little bit ridiculous. Personally, I think that's kind of crazy. But we're going to go ahead and modify this tower so it's a little bit more fun, a little bit more usable, and hopefully a little bit more interesting. So let's go ahead and get started. The first thing you're going to notice is that underneath the name of the category for that tower, which is Emberlords, right, we're going to have various different levels. So each chunk of code in this particular part of the code file is going to start with a key and then the name of the level of that tower. So in this instance, we have Ember_Lords_Mage_level 1. Underneath that, we're going to have the cost and then the key for the name of the tower, along with the build taunt, and then the string for the taunt that basically gets voice acted whenever you go to build said tower. Excuse me. So underneath that, we've got a bunch of info here that really doesn't pertain to anything we're going to be doing in today's episode. You don't really need to pay any attention to this. Anything underneath the info key or the decal key, nothing super crazy complicated here that we need to worry about. Anchor and position, again, nothing crazy we really got to worry about. Units. Now this is something that you will want to pay attention to later on. This is something that we're going to touch on and revisit in a later episode when we go over the advanced modding tactics. So we're going to take a look at basically this chunk of code roundabout here. Essentially what this is saying is, hey, here you've built your tower. Now we're going to actually put the unit on top of the tower that's going to be shooting at the enemies from the tower. So in this instance, we have an Ember Lords Mage Shooter at level 1. And that's the specific sprite that's going to get built for this tower. And then you can see down here we have the animations file. So just as with the enemies, they have their own animations file, so do the towers. Now underneath that, we also have skills. Now the skills here are a little bit different. Again, like I said, 9 times out of 10, all the code you're going to need is going to be separated into two different files. So when it comes to the skills as far as building the tower is concerned, that is an entirely different set of skills from when the tower is attacking. And that kind of makes sense, right? Because skills as far as it being built versus attacking, well, it can't attack if it hasn't been built yet. So hopefully that makes sense. If it doesn't, join the Discord server, I'll give some further explanation. But essentially, this is basically the build duration. How long it takes for this tower to build is 0.8 seconds. I suppose in theory you could make this faster or shorter, depending on, I don't know, whatever god-awful suggestion or idea pops in your head. I don't know why you would change this, but suit yourself if you want to. In any case, next up, we've got the range on unit. We don't really need to worry about any of this code right here. There's a lot of code mostly in the tower underscore settings that we don't have to worry about. But don't worry, there are some things that we will worry about later on. So down beneath that, we have the quick menu. And basically, this is where we have the sell icon and the upgrade icon. The first one down here, this little chunk of code right here, underneath items array, this is the icon for upgrading the tower. As you guys can see here, the action type is string upgrade underscore tower, and then the action keys saying to upgrade it to a level 2 infernal mage. And this position right here is where it sets that icon underneath the wheel. So in essence, whenever you click on a tower, especially if it's a level 4 tower and it's got multiple abilities, there is a little wheel that appears. And it basically has various different icons listed on it. Some of them could be abilities. Another one could be a sell icon. If it's a barracks tower or it has some kind of barracks-like unit that has a rally range, that usually is listed on there as a separate position or index, if you will. So in this instance, the upgrade icon is set to position 4, and the sell icon is set to position 8 at the very bottom. Moving on from that, though, see a bunch of code down here. Offset, we don't really need to worry about. The tooltips and all of this stuff down here, really not anything that we need to worry about. And then how do we know we've gotten to the end of that whole chunk of code for just the level 1 tower? Well, now we're going to see a chunk of code for the level 2 tower, Ember underscore Lords underscore Mage underscore level 2, with a cost of 180. Now, as we go through and modify this tower, I'm actually going to go ahead and change the price of the tower at each tier. So we're going to make this a little bit cheaper to upgrade and buy from level 1. So we've got a cost of 90 for the base price at level 1. For level 2, we're going to buff the price a little bit down to 140 at level 2. So a reduction of 40 gold. And if we scroll down even further, because all of the code for level 2 is essentially the same as level 1, and the same goes for level 3. Really, the only differences are going to be visual changes. So using different animations, different, build sequences, different taunts, etc. So this instance, we're going to go ahead and buff the price down to, let's see, last one was 140. So let's make this like, say, I don't know, 200. And we'll go ahead and save that. Now, finally, once we get to level 4, though, there are going to be some differences. So first off, let's set the price to something a little bit cheaper. We'll make this like, I don't know, 255 gold. All these numbers are arbitrary. You can set the price values to whatever you want when you guys are going through and working on your own version of this mod. But feel free to follow along if you want to make it 255 as well. So further down, once we get to the code we're going to need, you're going to notice a set of skills. And this is where the abilities are going to come into play. Now, some of this code could appear in the units underscore settings file. In this instance, for the Infernal Mage, we're going to see code for it probably in both files. So right here, underneath the skills array, we see the first skill is called forward underscore object underscore on underscore target underscore overcharge. So the overcharge ability, if I remember correctly, is the one that allows it to summon lava geysers for 200 gold apiece. 3 different levels of upgrades. Now, before we continue any further, I want to talk about something that's somewhat important. Let's say you're going through the process of modifying Kingdom Rush Vengeance, and you guys want to do something drastic, something unique, something never done before. Let's say you want to remove an ability from a tower. Let's say you just really, really don't like that ability. You don't want it to be in the game at all. Okay, no problem. There is actually a way to remove that ability so that it's no longer there. But there's a couple steps. So the first thing you're going to want to do is find wherever this chunk of code is and completely just delete it out. So where do you start and where do you end? This is important because if you delete too much code on accident, you could end up breaking the game. And we don't want that. We don't want the game to crash. We want our game to run perfectly. So underneath, wherever the skills array, whatever skill you happen to be looking at, you're going to want to look for this type of line of code right here. DICT inside of the less than or greater than symbols. You're going to find all the way down here, this line, which is essentially the same as the line above. The only difference is that there's a / in front of DICT. This marks the end of a chunk of code, at least for the skill inside of this array that we're working with. And you'll notice that this is the correct spot to start and end because they're indented at the same point. And that there's another skill right underneath that marks the start of another skill. So we don't want to go past this point. So we're going to start from here. We're going to select all of this code. We're going to go ahead and delete this code. And then we're going to save our changes. If you guys don't remember how to do that, you could do Control plus the S key, S as in Sam, or you can go to File and do simply Save. Now that we've got that out of the way, let's go ahead and take a look at the Affliction ability. We're not going to delete the other two abilities. We're going to keep those for the purposes of this example for this video. So let's go ahead and give this a bit of a price buff. We're going to buff the price to 100 instead of 150. We'll keep the max level at 2, so same number of upgrades. And then the one below that is the Infernal Portal. I think this one's a little bit overpriced, so we're just going to give it a slight price buff from 220 all the way down to 200. We'll go ahead and save that. And at this point, basically, the only other thing that we need to do is make sure that the icons underneath the upgrade selection menu, when we go to click on this tower, once we've bought it to level 4, reflects the changes that we want to make. So in this instance, we don't want that lava geyser ability in the middle there anymore. We want to remove that. So we're going to locate the same ability with the same name, which is the overcharge. If you guys ever get lost and you're trying to find code that you want to change or get to, again, Control plus F is going to be one of your best friends. In this instance, you could have just done Control plus F, and the next search result, assuming you didn't make it case sensitive, should have been overcharge down here, where I have my cursor highlighting that. But we're going to go ahead and remove that. Notice that's in position 4. Position 4 is always going to be in the middle, and position 8 is always going to be the cell icon at the bottom. You can also remove the cell icon on a level 4 tower, or for that matter, any level tower. So we're actually going to go ahead and do that just to show you guys what that's going to look like. So we're going to remove the cell button, and we're going to remove the overcharge ability. So we're going to delete all of that code. Both of those chunks of code, gone, bye-bye, sayonara. And now we have this left. So if done properly, when you guys go to upgrade your tower to level 4, you should only see 2 abilities. You should not be able to sell the level 4 tower, but you should be able to sell everything level 3 and below that. And you shouldn't see the Affliction, or I should say, the Lava Geyser ability in the middle. Underneath that, again, just some same old tooltip and offset code that we don't really necessarily need to worry about. But this is the end of the changes that we're going to need to make here. So now if we exit out of this after we've saved our changes, I'll just do Control plus S one more time just to make sure. We'll go ahead and exit. Now we're going to go to units_settings. And we're going to do the same search. I'll go ahead and full screen this here real quick and hit Find Next. Now there's Emberlord's Mage Attack. And if I scroll up here a little bit, let me just make sure that I'm in the right spot because I'm pretty sure we're not. This first search result shouldn't have been the right one. Okay, it's not. And the reason I know that is because I'm seeing some code here that pertains to the Viking boss event. Yeah, not something we really particularly need to worry about. But let's just go ahead and scroll down to the next instance. So, scrolling down at least 2 or 3 times after hitting Find Next, we should see something like Ember_Lords and Ember_Lords_Mage_Shooter_LVL1. So this is where we're going to want to start for the changes as far as the different stats of the tower is concerned. So we're going to see an army type, block type, block type. Don't really need to worry about any of this. We're just going to worry about the skills. So the first thing we're going to see is an idle flip. This is basically where an enemy will basically kind of rotate if it has the appropriate animations for it. And there's no enemies in range. It'll just kind of do these idle flips back and forth. It'll face a different direction or a different angle. So that does happen sometimes in the code. If you ever just let your towers sit for a while, you'll notice that sometimes they'll slightly change the direction that they're facing or looking. So that's what this code basically is saying. And the cooldown for this at a bare minimum is 5 seconds, and at maximum it's 8 seconds. Now underneath that, we have the range unit and the main modifier key set to true. So this is its main attack. And as a level 1 tower, that makes sense because, well, it only has one ability, one main attack, which is the fireball. Now, 1.8 second cooldown is just a little bit too slow for my own personal taste. The action time is 0.7 seconds, so we're going to give this thing a substantial buff. We're going to buff the cooldown by reducing it all the way from 1.8 seconds to 0.9. We'll keep the range at 300. I don't think that's anything we need to really mess with, per se. And at that point, all we have to do is go down here to the projectile chunk of code. Again, they spell it projectile with a Y instead of a J, is how the word projectile is normally spelled. But in the code, that's just how they spelled it. Not sure why that is, but it is what it is. Next up, we've got to take a look at the damage type. You'll notice that that's set to a 1. If you guys remember from the episode where we were modifying enemies, you'll know that a 1 for the damage type is magic damage. And the damage min and damage max are pretty self-explanatory. So the range of damage is 5 on the low end to a maximum of 16 on the high end. So we're going to go ahead and change this so it's a little bit more consistent. We're going to make this 11 to 16 instead of 5 to 16. If we scroll down further, we're going to get basically the same type of stuff that we got with the level 1 shooter. And we'll make similar changes. So once again, we're going to buff the cooldown from 1.8 seconds to 0.9. Note that if I wanted to change this to a whole number, I could just type 1.0. That would also work. Or I could replace this word real here with integer and change this from a decimal number and just type in a whole number such as 1 or 2 or 3, etc. The range does need a bit of a slight buff, so we're going to make this 335 instead. And I'm comfortable with the damage that it has at level 2, but we will nerf the max damage a little bit. We'll nerf it to, say, something like 38. And maybe give it a slight buff on the low end at 21. Now we'll repeat the process for level 3. As always, again, the changes that I'm making are just arbitrary. You don't necessarily have to follow along verbatim, but you can set these values to be essentially whatever you guys want. So I'm going to set the range to 375. We're going to keep the cooldown for its attack speed the same. And as far as the damage is concerned, this is just a little bit too overpowered in my personal opinion. 33 to 100, especially for the price that we're making this tower now, being as cheap as it is, just seems a little bit too OP for me. 67 should work. Actually, let's make that even lower. 57 should work. If you guys want help with some appropriate scaling, Vaduke is a pretty good mathematician, from my understanding. So I definitely recommend talking to him as far as like balance changes are concerned. He might be able to help you guys get pointed in the right direction as far as making sure your stuff isn't too terribly overpowered. Now we've got ourselves a good list of skills to work with. So the first thing we're going to notice, idle flip, same as above with all the other 3 different mage towers. But the overcharge ability is something that we got rid of in the other code file. So here, we're going to want to get rid of that entirely here, in this code file. So it's going to take a little bit of scrolling, but eventually, we're going to find where that ability ends. So here we can see object on target, affliction. So that should be the start of a new ability. So if I hit delete and scroll up, these 2 dictionary chunks of code should line up as far as where they're indented. If they don't, that means that we either deleted too much or we're not at the end of the skill that we want to delete or remove from the code. If we scroll down here, we're going to see that the cooldown on the target affliction ability is 12 seconds. I'm going to leave that to be the same. We'll buff the range that it can be cast to 375. And if we scroll down a little bit further, we can see that it crowds a target of enemies. So the min targets is set to 1, and the max targets is set to 8. Now the range of this ability is 90. We want to make that a little bit bigger. So we'll go for 120. The min targets is fine. We'll buff the max targets to 10. And then notice down here, further in the code, we're going to see that there's some unit underscore extra underscore data. And then there's the duration. So this is the duration that enemies that get affected by this ability have that affliction for, which is 5 seconds in both instances. So we're going to buff this slightly from 5 to 10 if you get it at level 2. But it's still going to be 5 seconds at level 1. Now notice that it says down here, it says gain underscore armor, and then there's 2 integers. One is minus 25 and one is minus 50. So if you guys were paying attention to the previous episode where we modified enemies, you'll know that the armor is different from the armor type. And in this instance, we care about how much armor rating or percentage we're taking off of the enemies, not necessarily about what type of armor it is. That's why it's gain underscore armor, not gain underscore armor / type. It's not specified. So it's universally applying it to both resistance types, both magic and physical. So at tier 1, it subtracts 25% armor rating or magic resistance, and at tier 2, it's 50%. So we're going to change this. We're going to make it 30% at level 1 and 60% at level 2. Once again, we'll make the same changes down here. 5-second cooldown, or duration, I should say, excuse me. 10-second duration here. And we'll make the same changes for the percentages that we did up above. And voila, we're done with that. Moving on, we have the infernal portal. Now the cooldown for this is 25 seconds, which I think is reasonable. We don't want this thing to be spammed so much so that enemies can literally never pass through. Notice here too that it says exclude boss set equal to true. I personally have never tried setting this to false to see if it would work on a boss, but you guys are feel free to try it yourselves down in the comment section below. Let me know if it ends up working for you or not. The range for this that it can be cast is 250. We're going to buff that to 375 once more. And we're going to save our changes. Always good to just frequently save your changes in case, for any reason, something happens and somehow your notepad accidentally closes. Maybe you accidentally clicked out of it or hit a shortcut key that got you to a totally different window and then messes up your code. You want to just save your work frequently as you're making your changes, which I apologize. I haven't really been doing that throughout this video. This is a bad example, but never mind that. Moving on. Crowd's target with a range of 120. We'll leave it at that. Now we can change the min target so that it will use the portal, the teleport portal, on a single enemy instead of just a minimum number of targets in a crowd. So we can change this to a 1. So then that way there's no minimum as far as how many enemies this ability can affect. Now notice that underneath here, this object key, we have the teleport portal and the max number of units that it can teleport at each tier or upgrade. It's currently set to 4 at level 1 and 6 at level 2. We're going to change that. We're going to make it 5 at level 1 and 10 at level 2. The range of the portal, as far as the size of how many areas or how much area it can affect enemies, is set to 150 currently. We're not going to mess with that. Notice down here, this is the most important part of this ability. How far back do enemies get sent? So teleport underscore config. Now the duration is 0.3 seconds, and the nodes that it subtracts is minus 15. This is atrocious. This does not send enemies that far back at all. We want to change this so that the enemies get teleported way, way further back. So we're going to try doubling this and see what happens. Now we're down to the final change that we need to make, which is the main attack. Once again, we're going to set the cooldown to 0.9 seconds. We're going to set the range to 375. And we're going to change the maximum damage to something, say, such as, I don't know, 66. The minimum damage, we're going to buff slightly to 53. The point here is to make this mage tower a little bit faster and more consistent with its damage. That's the point of the whole set of changes that we've made thus far, if you guys have been copying my changes verbatim in your own mod. And with that, ladies and gentlemen, we're done with the changes for this tower. So now that we've done that, let's go ahead and exit out of here once we save our code. And let's go ahead and minimize this window so that we can run the game. So now that we've made sure that we have the infernal mage tower selected, we're going to hop into Odal Farmlands real quick, since that has usually a good amount of starting cash. And we're going to try building a infernal mage. Now you're going to notice that the changes, if done correctly, will reflect in both the price, the range of the tower, and the damage. So as you guys can see here, a lot cheaper to get this thing at level 1, and much better damage, and the attack speed is now average instead of slow. So if we run the game, and we watch these enemies start to walk through the level, you're going to notice that this Infernal Mage Tower at level 1 has a much faster attack speed than it normally does. So it should be 0.9 seconds, and yes, that is noticeably faster, and the damage is a lot better. If we upgrade this tower, we're going to get a slight range increase and slightly better damage, 23 to 41, with max soul upgrades. At level 3, we have 36 to 62, and at level 4, we have 58 to 72. So let's try going ahead and getting this at level 4. Now you're going to notice that the price for all of this is pretty much the same. And if we buy these abilities, then they should get used fairly quickly, and hopefully we'll have a chance to see them in action. But pay attention to the teleport, because that's going to be the most important change that we've made. Notice that these guys have lost all of their armor rating, not that they had that much to begin with. We'll see. Hopefully we can get an example of the Infernal Teleport. There you go. So notice that that recruit got sent all the way back from here to here, approximately. So increasing the distance that the enemies got sent back from 15 nodes to 30 nodes kind of gives you guys an understanding of how short a distance that actually is. So this might actually even need a bit more of a buff in terms of the distance that they get sent back down the path. Because for the price of the gold that you're paying, and for how often it's using it, I feel like it should send enemies a little bit further back, especially if they're very threatening ones. But hopefully that gives you guys an understanding of the changes that we've made. And also, if you'll note again, once I go to click on the tower, I'll show you this real quick. Notice that there is no middle ability for the lava geysers, and there is no sell button for the tower at level 4. There is for level 3, 2, and 1, but there is not one for level 4. So we cannot sell this tower now that we've gotten it to level 4. The only way that we could get rid of this thing is by restarting the level. But at levels 1, 2, and 3, we are able to sell the tower and upgrade it. And even up to here, we can still sell it. So now that we've done that, ladies and gentlemen, let's go ahead and exit out of here. And let's go into a tower to modify. That's going to be a little bit more interesting. So if we go back to our File Explorer, please make sure that you guys exited the game before you start modifying any more code. Let's go ahead and open tower settings real quick. And let's go ahead and actually look up a different tower to modify, one that has some sort of rally range. In this instance, I'm going to talk about Swamp Things. Granted, it still is an archer, and apparently I typed the wrong thing. Never mind, it still doesn't like this search result. What if we tried just swamp? There we go. Swamps is the name of this tower in the code. So without changing any of the price, let's take a look at the other stats for this tower. Now you'll notice that it says underneath here soldiers with a max count of 1 for the swamp monster soldier at level 1. And then also notice under here there is a swamp monster shooter at level 1. So there's two sets of units that you need to pay attention to here, because this is a rather interesting case where this thing it acts not only as an archer but also as a barracks unit at times, because we can switch between the two. Normally it would just be units or soldiers, one of the two, but rarely both. Here we have skills, and after the build skill, where we've built our tower, you're going to see a skill with the key named Rally. And you're going to see the range of that rally is set to 250, which is kind of small. And a little disappointing, frankly, to be honest. I would have thought they would have at least made the rally range for the Swamp Thing a little bit bigger. So we're going to make it the same as the vanilla version of Kingdom Rush Vengeance Dark Knights. And we're going to set this to 290. We're going to save our changes. And we're going to repeat this process for all the other various levels of this tower. So now that we've changed the rally range for all levels or versions of this tower, let's talk about the different skills that this thing has. It has an insta-kill, which frankly I'm not a fan of because I just think insta-kills make tower defense games too easy. So what if we want to remove this ability? Well, we're just going to go ahead and simply repeat the same process that we did before. Swamp Monster Smash Upgrade, with a base price of 140 at each tier for 3 different levels. We'll go ahead and keep the Blinding Liquid upgrade because I do think it's a decent ability, and I like it. The Carnivore ability is just, frankly, useless. But that being said, we'll go ahead and keep it. Now, if we look at the quick menu here, we're going to see that Blinding Liquid, which is the stun ability, is set in the middle position at position 4. Position 5 is reserved for the Smash Insta-Kill ability, and the Carnivore is set to position 6. Now, because we got rid of the insta-kill ability, before we delete it, we want to reposition the Blinding Liquid so that it's no longer in the middle. And so then that way we have the abilities evenly spaced on either side, instead of having one ability in the middle and then another one offset on either side. If you guys don't care about that sort of thing, that's fine. But me personally, I like things to look nice and neat. So we're going to go ahead and reposition this from position 4 to position 5. So that it's no longer in the middle. And then we're going to go ahead and delete the code for the Smash upgrade icon. We're going to go ahead and save our changes. And then we're going to go ahead and once again get rid of the cell icon. Notice that there is also a new icon, which is labeled Rally. And it's set to position 7. There's also another icon where you can change what the Swamp Thing is doing. And that is set to position 12. So you can change it from being an archer to a barracks unit or vice versa, and this is the position that it's set to. Down below here, we don't need to worry about anything, but we will need to worry about the code for the Smash upgrade in another code file, which is, you guessed it, in units_settings. So once you save your changes to your code, you can go ahead and exit out of this file and go over to units_settings. Full screen the window, and search for swamps. Hit find next, and it should bring you to this line of code right here with the code swamp_monster_shooter_LVL1, and you'll know that you're in the right place. From there, you can scroll on down And you're going to notice that you're going to see all of this code pertaining to the swamp monster when it's in its archer form. This does not apply to the swamp monster when it's in its barracks form. That is an entirely separate set of skills, stats, etc. But we're just focused on changing the level 4 tower. So you can see here we're at Swamp Monster Shooter level 4. And underneath the skills array, there is the Swamp Monster Soldier level 4 insta-kill. We want to go ahead and get rid of this. So we're going to select all the way from here. And keep going further on down. Actually, I apologize. Might have spoken too soon. So what I'm seeing here is that the projectile damage is underneath here, set equal to 122 to 150 max. So this might not be something we need to edit just yet. So the insta-kill chance is set equal to a 1, which would be 100% chance if I'm not mistaken. This chance array here pertains to the blinding liquid, 0.02, 0.04, and 0.06. And we can see that same code down here. So let's see if we can find the code that we need to delete before we just go making our changes. It seems like the one here for the ranged unit with the regular stun has the key main on it. So presumably this is the projectile that does not deal insta-kill damage. So I think if we play our cards correctly here, we want to go ahead and delete this chunk of code starting from that top line dictionary there all the way down to here. And if we save our changes and then exit out of the file, we'll minimize this real quick and go into the game Kingdom Rush Vengeance to test out our changes. We should see that hopefully, if we did everything correctly, that this will work. So let's go ahead and select our swamp thing.
I will cede no ground.
And go back into Old Farmlands. And if we build ourselves a Swamp Thing tower,
You cannot shoot the forest.
and we click on the rally range, you'll notice that it's considerably bigger.
No one is safe. I am not your prey.
And if we remember to click on the correct power to change it from range mode to barracks mode,
You cannot shoot the forest.
we can see that the rally range works as intended.
No one is safe. I will cede no ground. Ah, fresh meat.
Now notice that the cell icon is gone, as is the middle ability for the insta-kill chance. But the blinding liquid, on the other hand, and the carnivore ability still remain.
Too bad. You're annoying.
And if we go ahead and put this tower back into its archer form, let him do his thing and shoot the enemies, then we can see here that clearly his stun chance ability does work. And if we put him out onto the road to fight enemies, then he most assuredly does still work in melee combat. As does his stun chance on the ground. So with that, ladies and gentlemen, that's going to wrap it up for the end of today's episode. I hope you guys enjoyed. Let me know down in the comments section below if you guys have any questions, comments, or concerns about modifying towers in your own version of the mod for Kingdom Rush Vengeance that you guys are working on. I'd be happy to help you guys. And we do have a Discord server. Please make sure to join that. I'll try and leave a link down in the comments section of the video below. And without further ado, ladies and gentlemen, I hope you guys enjoy the rest of your evenings. This is Pollux the Wise. Peace out.